What's up everyone, in this video I want to go through all the new features in version 1.1 for the geometry along curve tool. So when you download version 1.1 you will have this new zip file. It's basically is very similar to the last one, and it's just made to showcase some of the new features that I have introduced. So anything that I showcased in version 1.0 is still valid, and that zip file should also work just fine. But if you want to see the features of the 1.1, I have basically written them out inside here, and I want to go through them in this video. So the first two features are very nice for aligning geometry better for your with your input curve. So let's say I have the setup is something like this. So this is my basic stage, and I am basically instantiating all the geometry with the Instantiate tool. And for something like these fences, I basically just went ahead and templated the geometry, went ahead to my curve tool and used the edges of the template geometry to let me template it back, and then I basically use the points of this template geometry to guide my poly curves. And what I did next is, with the new parameters for the tool, there's basically ability to adjust height and ability to peak the curves. So let's say I have these at 0. You can see that by default the geometry that would be aligned along the curve would look something like this, because our curve is since our curve sits right at on the edges of the geometry. Geometry is being instantiated basically right at the middle. So it would be nice to have ability to adjust height, like I showcased here, and also adjust the peak. And you can see that the peak node basically pushes inward or outward the poly curve without changing their angles. And you can see with this ability we have a lot faster way to creating these railings without actually manually going to the curve and adjusting it. So next one I want to showcase is also ability to duplicate geometry. So basically there's a new tab which is called post process, and in post process node tab you can apply a random rotation for the roll, yaw, and pitch. You can also say which parts of the geometry you should apply this random rotation. You can also randomly delete it, which I'm going to showcase a little bit later. But right at the bottom there is a tab for duplication of geometry. So let me showcase you this. The idea is that there's going to be a new viewer state for instantiate node, and if you go ahead and press enter, and if I'm going to put this copy duplication back to 0, you can see the viewer the handle should always be at the bounding box of the input geometry, basically located at the input geometry. So it should somewhat align with the copy geometry, and then you can just go ahead and move it. If you have selected duplicate option, you can see it's going to duplicate the geometry. Then you can select however many times you want to duplicate it. In this case, since I'm making a railing, just 2 times, and you can adjust it either through the viewport or through this parameter. And let me go ahead and see the output to align it back to something like this. So for the random deletion, let me go ahead and search for this geometry. So I have basically just a simple poles. This should be like a light pole or something. And again, I'm using the simple setup of post process, and I'm saying that we can actually randomize yaw. So that means that you can see that these poles can be rotated at any direction, basically, as long as it's 180 degrees. They can move like this, and then we can go ahead and randomly delete them. If you say, okay, so I do not delete, you can see, and then I just go ahead and delete them. And then you can also select what you want to delete: corners, straight pieces, or corners, or caps. If you deselect them, that means that they are not going to be deleted. In this case, I want to delete all of them. And the next option is selecting the manual size of the geometry pieces. So this is useful when you only want to instantiate one geometry piece, and you want to basically, if you want to instantiate only one straight piece along the curve. And basically this says that you can go ahead and override its size value. If you go to the controls and say use static size for straight pieces, you can see if you go ahead and select it, you can select its size for something like for these stairs, where I basically didn't save in my collection its correct size. I can go ahead and overwrite its size inside the geometry, inside the instantiate node itself. So this is very limited option, because you have to make sure that all of the pieces that you want to instantiate are actually the same size, because it's going to override its size for all the geometry pieces, and it's only going to do it for the straight ones. So for something like these stairs, it's going to work just fine. And I also wanted to showcase the option to reverse point order. So under the setup, you can go ahead and say reverse point order. So this is good because depending on how your geometry is aligned along the z-axis for something like stairs. Let's go to the stairs. So these are narrow stairs. You can see my geometry is aligned along the positive z-axis, but you can see that it's basically the top of the stairs are actually are close to the zero, and then the z is actually start of the stairs. So depending on how your geometry is rotated, it might be needed that you need to reverse the point order. So in this case, I needed to reverse the point order so that the stairs actually connect to each other. Another thing that I wanted to showcase is now when you are using the pattern mode for the geometry, the pattern does not have to be at least one time completed for the geometry. So in the previous 1.0 version, something like this inside for the pattern, let's say my pattern is B and A, it would be required for geometry pattern to be completed at least one time, even if there is very small space between, even though we have to fill a very small space. So you can see in this case, I can increase my pattern, and for the small polylines that need to be filled for something like this between these two corners, you can see it doesn't try to fill the entire pattern. So this is one thing that I fixed inside the actual HDA node. And that basically covers all the instantiate node fixes and new features. And one feature that I added for the IO node is to trigger actually saving of geometry for basically all the IO nodes that are in save mode inside the parent of this geometry node, whatever you are triggering the save for. So in this case, I have a bunch of IO nodes inside the subnetwork, and you can see not all of them are actually doing the saving. A lot of them are actually loading the geometry. So we want to make sure that actually we ignore the geometries, IO nodes that are actually loading geometry. But the idea is that I want to save my geometry, and so basically these are all the geometry that's being saved from this network. Let me go ahead and delete it. And inside this IO node, you will now have to be option to save all collections in parent network. So that means basically this would fence zeros network, all the IO nodes that are in the save mode and that are all set up correctly are going to save geometry so that you do not have to do it manually, basically for all the geometry collection nodes. So let me go ahead and say save geometry collection. It's going to be pretty fast, but you can see inside here I have a bunch of JSON files, and all of them are from different IO nodes. So that's just one way to quickly save your geometry out. And to finish off this video, let's go to the Unreal Engine, and I'm going to showcase one thing that I actually didn't know, is that there is basically Unreal handles are somewhat supported inside Unreal Engine now. So if you take a look at this basically instantiate geometry inside Unreal Engine, if you select it, you can see there's like this blue square inside here. It's actually a transform. This is the Unreal handle that has been also implemented under the Houdini handle component. You can basically use it just as inside Houdini. You can use it to move your computer duplicated geometry around. So yeah, and how I actually got the geometry, and I actually got the geometry out by using the another new feature that I actually added that I also almost forgot to showcase is actually instance geometry instance points second output of the node. So you can see that now the node is going to have a second output, and this output is basically just a instance point cloud that is needed for Unreal Engine to instantiate geometry. You can see basically it has normal up, scale, and Unreal Instance attributes all set up, and what you can do is just save this point cloud as its own separate file, and just like in this case, I went ahead and opened it up inside Unreal Engine, and all the geometry has been imported correctly. And that basically covers all the new features for the version 1.1. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you next time.